Good evening, everybody. Hi. Thanks for joining us on this lovely spring evening. My name is Robin Lake, and I direct the Center on Reinventing Public Education. We're a nonpartisan research and policy center at the University of Washington, Bothell. And on behalf of our co-hosts this evening, the University of Washington Computer Science and Engineering, the University of Washington College of Education, and Washington STEM, thanks for joining us to hear from Hadi Partovi and our special guests this evening. We're thrilled to have one of the nation's and really the world's leading innovators, entrepreneurs, and now an international leader in technology and education through Code.org and Hour of Code. So we couldn't be more thrilled to have him here, a local boy who made good. So thank you, Hadi. So this series, the Washington Education Innovation Forum, brings together policymakers, educational leaders at the district and school level, local and national innovators like Hadi, and other folks to really consider how Washington State can lead the country in the use of technology and education in our schools. My kids are lucky enough to be in a Seattle public school where they are really getting active use of technology and learning. They experiment with Khan Academy, and their teachers employ the best online curricula to really personalize their learning and extend the reach of the teachers in the classrooms. And in fact, the fifth graders at my kids' school did Hour of Code this year. They had such a great time doing it, and they were so engaged that their teacher said, all right, let's just make it Day of Code. Let's go. This is exciting. This is what we want to see, and this is why we're excited about the work that Hadi and his group are doing. But the truth is, too many of our schools in Washington really aren't ready to use technology in these ways, and too many of our kids aren't getting the skills they need in science, technology, math, and engineering, the STEM skills, to be prepared for life. But I really am optimistic that with action from all of us, from educators, from parents, and policymakers, we really can fix that. But I really also believe that we need to stop talking about isolated instances of one school or another and look toward comprehensive solutions that our state can grab hold of and run with. We need concrete goals and a concrete plan. I really hope tonight's conversation can launch that work. I know much of it is underway, and some of our colleagues in this room have been leaders in that front. But we need to make sure that Washington's kids have the skills that will prepare them for the 21st century. Right? So in a moment, I'll turn things over to Dr. Ed Lazowska to introduce Hadi Partovi and our panel. We've got some terrific students here tonight and Representative Reuven Carlyle, so this is going to be fun. I just wanted to note a couple of things. This evening event will be recorded and live streamed on UW TV, so thus the cameras. And hello to our online audience. Feel free to tweet if you feel so inclined. There's a hashtag up here, I believe. There it is. And finally, sincere thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for providing funding to these innovation forums. We appreciate the support. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ed Lazowska, who's the Bill and Melinda Gates Chair in Computer Science and Engineering at University of Washington and the founding director of the University of Washington's eScience Institute. Ed really makes the clearest case of just about anybody I know the need for STEM education and what we can do in Washington State. So over to Ed.
Great, thank you, and thanks to you for being here. I'm going to begin by telling you why I think what we're going to talk about this evening is important. I think it's a really critically important conversation. In the 21st century, pretty much every citizen should be exposed to computer science. All right? I firmly believe this, and I'd like you to go away this evening believing it if you don't already. And there are three reasons for this. One is there's something we call computational thinking. Computational thinking is problem decomposition and analysis. It's algorithmic thinking, algorithmic expression, modeling, abstraction, stepwise fault isolation, which we call debugging. And these are capabilities that everybody needs going forward, almost no matter what line of work or life they're in. And coding, as in code.org, okay, computer programming, I think of that as the hands-on, inquiry-based way that we teach computational thinking, right? So it is a valuable skill in many ways, but it's also an educational vehicle for a capability that everybody needs. Number two is just about every field is becoming an information field. So those who can sort of bend the power of the computer to their will are going to have an advantage in any field they enter. And let me give you two quick examples. I think biology is the real exemplar of this. And what happened in the 1950s was Watson and Crick discovered the biochemistry of our DNA. And what they really discovered was that our DNA is a digital code. It's a program. It can be read and deciphered and modified and rewritten. And from that day forward, biology, instead of being phyla and classification and things like that, was an information science, right? A complete transformation. Here's a personal example. When I was an undergraduate, which I hate to admit was like 45 years ago, right? It was the days in which Noam Chomsky was promulgating these theories of transformational grammars. And this completely transformed linguistics. To be honest, the main criterion for being a graduate student in linguistics, even at a top university in the 1960s and 1970s, was you spoke a couple of languages, right? So a colleague and I, who were computer science undergraduate sophomores, enrolled in a graduate linguistics course, right, taught by a Chomsky disciple, and we were able to completely blow away the linguistics graduate students, right, because that was a field that had transitioned to an information field, right, with grammars and also with things like, for the time, relatively large corpuses online that could be analyzed, right? And here's the third point. The software industry itself has an enormous workforce gap. And, you know, I hesitate to have people go away saying that I think students should choose educational paths for vocational reasons. I really don't believe that at all. I think you have to discover something you're really passionate about. But it's important to understand the dynamics of workforce because the data is really clear, but there's a lot of misunderstanding. So in computer science, we have a huge workforce gap, and to be honest, a huge diversity gap also. So we need more people in every sense of the word, okay? More in terms of numbers, more in terms of range of capabilities, more in terms of the diversity of the population they represent. But here are the numbers about workforce, okay? Nationally, the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that 71% of all new jobs in all STEM fields in the next decade are going to be in computing. So the STEM fields are the physical sciences, the life sciences, the social sciences, and engineering. All right? So 71% of all new jobs in all of those fields in this decade are in computing. And in this state, there was a study last October that looked not just at STEM fields, but at all fields. And they found only 2 fields in which there was a gap between workforce demand and degree supply at the bachelor's level, just 2. One of them was computer science, and the other one was all 10 fields of engineering lumped together, electrical, mechanical, industrial, right? And the gap in computer science was 2.5 times the gap in all of engineering lumped together, and nobody else at the bachelor's level even had a gap. So that's the story in this state, right? So there are remarkable opportunities. So 30 years ago, there was a report called A Nation at Risk. How many of you are familiar with that? Great. So this was a report that looked at the state of public education. And it had sort of the money quote in this report was, if this had been inflicted upon us by a foreign nation, we would have viewed it as an act of war. But as it is, we did it to ourselves. Right? But here's what this report suggested. It suggested that in order to graduate from high school, a student should have a half year of computer science. Now, a half year of computer science isn't a lot, but 31 years ago in 1983, right, computing was, an 8088 processor and 128 kilobytes of memory and PC-DOS 2.0. So this was really quite visionary. I see someone nodding up here who lived through those days along with Reuven and me. Okay, I appreciate that. So where are we 30 years later? Right? And Hadi will reinforce this, but in 9 out of 10 high schools nationwide, computer science is not offered. And in 31 of the 50 states, if it is offered, you don't get academic credit for it. Right? So, I don't view this as forward progress. I view it as nuts, and early exposure is absolutely essential. So that brings me finally to introducing our panel. I'll start with our featured guest, Hadi Partovi. The problem I've just described isn't new. Many people have chipped away at it for many years. They made many important contributions, but to be honest, none of them, including me, moved the needle, right? And in less than 2 years, Hadi has not just moved the needle, he has pinned the needle. It's been totally transformational. So Hadi's a technology entrepreneur in every way. He graduated from Harvard in 1994 with bachelor's and master's in computer science, spent 3.5 years at Microsoft in the early days of Internet Explorer, went off to do a startup called Tell Me, where he spent 2.5 years, returned to Microsoft for 3 years, left a second time to do another startup with his twin brother, Ali, who's also part of Code.org. Along the way, served as an advisor and investor in a number of well-regarded tech companies like Facebook and Zappos and Dropbox. And then he decided it was time to really change the world, right? And so he seized on this notion that there was a lack of exposure to computer science, computational thinking, programming in K-12. And after doing an enormous amount of homework, which I give him great credit for because he really understood the lay of the land and what had been done before he started, he began with a video which went ridiculously viral, 20 million views in a matter of weeks. Hopefully many of you have seen that. And then he had this crazy idea, which was that he would develop the right tools and promote them so that every school kid in America would spend an hour programming during something that for more than a decade we've called Computer Science Education Week. It coincides with Grace Murray Hopper's birthday in the first week of December. Grace Murray Hopper was a programmer in the Navy many, many years ago, and she's best known, among other things, for being the originator of the word bug. In relay computers, a bug was, in Grace Hopper's experience, literally a bug that got stuck between the leaves of a relay and caused an erroneous calculation. So that's the origin of the term, which she's credited for. Anyway, you know, we run open houses and programming contests, but Hadi's notion was that the whole country would program for an hour. Now, that was, at some level, an astonishingly audacious goal, but between December and now, more than 30 million students have spent at least an hour programming using Hadi's tools. And among other things, it's more women and more underrepresented minorities than in the entire history of the field. Right? So it's just absolutely mind-boggling, and there's much more to come. So what we're going to have, as soon as I sit down, is a panel moderated by State Representative Reuven Carlyle, who represents the 36th district. Reuven himself is a technology entrepreneur in wireless, software, clean energy spaces. He's a passionate advocate for what I would describe as policies that pass the common sense sniff test. And I admire this enormously. I want to say also that his 7th grade son, Zeb, is here somewhere tonight. So there he is. Zeb, thank you for joining us. Then Reuven will moderate the panel. And in addition to Hadi, we'll have 2 high school students joining us. The first is Ifra Abshur, who's a sophomore at Rainier Beach High School, where she's currently enrolled in AP Computer Science. And she's become a real spokesperson for early exposure to computer science at a number of public events recently. She's really become a tremendous convert. She was born in Uganda after her family left Somalia after the outbreak of the Civil War. They immigrated to the United States in 2001 when she was 3 years old. So it's really a remarkable story. She says that after graduating, she wants to come to the University of Washington and major in medicine and computer science. So we certainly want to encourage that. Please come join us. Secondly, Megan Fu is a junior at Holy Names. She took AP Computer Science during her sophomore year. I met her last summer when she was a counselor for a set of summer camps that we run every summer for young women in middle school. So we ask teachers to identify students who would be great at helping younger students learn computing. And Megan spent the summer with us last summer helping young women and men for one of the camps, I guess, learn programming. So I want to say there was a second counselor from Holy Names last summer who was 2 years ahead of Megan, a senior, and she's a freshman in computer science at the University of Washington this year. So we certainly hope Megan follows in her footsteps. So please join me in welcoming Reuven, Hadi, Ifra, and Megan.
Thank you so much, Ed. Appreciate that. And the Center for Reinventing Education and the University of Washington. It's just great to be here. I want to start by with just a quick shout out to my good friend, Representative Chad Magendas, who I see here, and former Representative Marcy Maxwell is also here. There's just so much support across political parties, across the whole spectrum in our state, not only to make computer science part of the DNA of everything that we do, but also to acknowledge that so much of our quality of life is directly tied to high-paying jobs, to the jobs of the 21st century, and electrical, mechanical, and software engineers, all kinds of different roles are just the core of the great companies that we've built in this state, and there's a reason that we're all here tonight. Let's start off with a couple of real deal issues. We know that we are living in a time of transformational social change. There's just a historic evolution underway within the world. We know that political movements, we know that economic disruption, we know that new companies, we know that everything from moving toward the cloud, toward the personalization, localization, and customization of mobile is just completely disruptive on every level. The issue that we face isn't just, are we going to create jobs for the 21st century and sort of have a workforce, but are we going to have a civic society that's fully engaged in the learning that comes from being aware of the world around you? All of those issues go to the core of how we view technology. Technology is foundational to everything we choose to do. The reason so many people are here tonight, the reason people are taking massively online courses, the reason institutions of higher education are moving toward hybrid learning and all kinds of transformational changes is that technology empowers content that was previously inaccessible. The vision, the power, the passion, the spirit behind Code.org is not just the formal side of curricula, professional development, and teacher education, but the forcing function of engaging young people to make learning fun, to touch something deeper, of figuring out the how. So we want to talk about that tonight. We want to have a conversation that really touches on what's unique and what's powerful about having both sides of that, of the ledger. Sort of the formal educational reform and change that comes from making technology real and actionable for people, as well as that forcing function of why this conversation is unique. So with that, Hadi, give us a quick elevator pitch for not only your vision, but why you think this that is taking off.
Sure. Well, first I'd like to thank the Center for Reinventing Public Education for inviting me here. So I actually sent some slides to Rosa here, which I'll show real quickly in terms of the pitch for why computer science. And this has already been, you and Ed spoke about it really well, but I just want to show some of the data that Ed just showed graphically is really interesting. I promise only 2 slides, I think. This shows in high school within STEM how much time is spent on computer science. So this is high school students within science, technology, engineering, and math, the slice that is spent on computer science. And this is the job picture. And this is new jobs and getting filled jobs, and this ratio has actually increased to 70% now since I made this slide, as Ed quoted. So computer science is dominating the STEM fields, but that's not being reflected in high school. One other quick slide. If you care about jobs in the economy, the ratio of the jobs nationwide are outnumbering graduates roughly 3 to 1. The delta adds up to about 100,000 jobs a year and about 1 million jobs over a decade, which adds up to about $500 billion of economic value that we're not capturing because of the previous graph that I showed you. In this state, it's a particularly big deal. The ratio I showed nationwide, I'll go back to this thing. The nationwide ratio from a job standpoint is 3 to 1. In this state, each graduate in computer science is met with 27 open jobs in this state per graduate, which is, we're pretty much the highest ratio state in terms of the ratio of open jobs in computing to students graduating in the field. That said, the reason I started Code.org had actually nothing to do with the jobs, and it was more about the reason you mentioned, the question of, why is it that in school we teach people how the digestive system works or what H2O means or how electricity works, and those are sort of the science things you learn, but not how the internet works, or what does HTTP mean, or how does the inside of an app work. And those things are just as foundational and fundamental today as learning about covalent bonds or water as H2O or things like that. And in a society that believes in the American dream, that believes in freedom of opportunity, the fact that 90% of schools, even if your kid goes to a good school, they don't even have the opportunity to learn this stuff, just seems un-American to me. If you said to somebody that 90% of our schools won't teach black kids how to learn computer programming, you'd think, that's a major civil rights issue. Or if you said 90% of schools won't teach girls computer programming, again, you'd be appalled. It turns out 90% of our schools won't teach anybody computer programming. So maybe it's fair because of that reason, but it's still just as appalling to me. So that's my elevator pitch of why code.org and why I started this organization.
So the question that we face isn't just how do we bring about a social movement so that computer science becomes a de facto standard in every high school and every middle school. But the real question is, how do we get parents, how do we get students, how do we get people to allow that curiosity to come forward, to be curious how an app works, why it was designed the way it is, what it means to integrate, right? We live in a world where interoperability or connecting things is the essence of everything. You've got all these separate silos of our lives. The question really is, in learning how to code, in learning to be intellectually curious, do you see in elementary school kids, in middle school kids, in high school kids, do you see that curiosity? Has that been the reason that an hour of code has been so popular?
Yeah, those at elementary and middle school kids, first of all, they have no idea that their parents didn't learn this stuff, especially the third graders. The concept that they're learning something that their parents don't know is very new and foreign. And also, they don't think of it as, oh, this isn't for me, it's only for a limited group. They just think it's fun. So these are, especially these days, these are kids that are for the first generation that are born on iPhones and iPads. And the idea of creating an app is one of the coolest things they could aspire to.
So tell us about the growth of Hour of Code.
Sure, yeah. When the Hour of Code idea, frankly, came in June of last year. At the time, code.org was 2 people. And we're like, what if we could get 10 million kids to do 1 hour of code? And we're like, well, Computer Science Education Week was literally 5 months and 1 week away. So we're like, well, we first need to hire a team, build a bunch of tutorials, and start spreading the word really quickly. But we figured, 1 hour is so little to ask, and it's the first thing we could do to basically get people to really engage rather than signing a petition, because you sign a petition and nothing happens. And so 10 million was a big, big audacious goal. And personally, I thought, the video we'd made had reached more than 10 million people. If we aim for 10 million, maybe we'll get 2 million, and that alone is an enormous victory. The evening before it started, we'd gotten 5 million kids pledging to do it. So I thought, you know what, we'll at least hit half of our goal, which is still more than I already hoped for. And then in the first day, we had 4 million kids. And then that was like the start. And then every day afterwards, there was more kids. So it was somewhat unreal that within a week, we hit 20 million students. And the most powerful thing about the experience for me was the potential that it showed in American schools. And the reason I mention this is a campaign that launched on the homepage of Google, in every single Apple store, on the homepage of MSN, on the homepages of YouTube, Yahoo, and Bing, also with a speech by the president, by Senator Cory Booker, by Governor Jeb Bush, by Newt Gingrich, by House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. All of those people combined led to, and we measure all this stuff because on the internet you can measure, all of those things combined led to about 2 million kids doing the Hour of Code. And then American school teachers led to the rest of the 18 million. And that's a huge, huge sort of thing about the American school system, which a lot of people envision American schools as, oh, this problem or that problem. They don't talk about the opportunity of what an American school teacher can do if they're given something exciting that their kids can get engaged in.
That's right. And I think that's a great way to characterize it in terms of teachers are the heart and soul of trying to bring this kind of opportunity. Ifra and Megan, share with us, I have a question for you. Share with us when the light bulb went off that engaging in computer science, that learning about coding, sort of the curiosity of the technology of how. When did that light bulb go off for you? Tell us about that moment.
Would you like to start off?
Okay, well, I think for me, it was probably in my computer science class. We were creating a game of our choice, and then our teacher, we had a Microsoft volunteers do that through the TEALS program, Technology Education and Literacy in Schools, where they send actual volunteers from Microsoft, Amazon, Google to your classes, and they teach for you. And I thought that was really cool, and that's why I enrolled in the class. And when I realized that computer science was really for me, it was probably when my app was submitted to the Windows Store. And then, yeah. And then our school got $100 for that. And then I was like, wow, that was the easiest thing I ever did. And I got paid for something I did in like 2 days. So I was like, okay. And then I started doing it more and more, and I realized that I actually like it. I like creating something and seeing the finished product and seeing other people play the finished product. And that made me feel proud because I created something with just my hands. And that's what I liked the most. And that's when I realized that I want to continue beyond just high school and beyond college. I want to continue as a career choice and use what I learned and hopefully influence other people.
Wow, that's amazing. I wish I have not created my own app yet, but
Competition
really though. For me, I think the light bulb really went off was when our computer science teacher at Holy Names was doing rounds at all the math classes, and he would preach a little bit about coding, how wonderful it is, and he had statistics like Hadi had here about all the job opportunities. And so I thought I'd give it a try, and day one of class, we did the Hello World simulation, where you system.out.print hello world, and it was wonderful. I was so excited because my code ran, there was no bugs on the screen either, and just seeing something that I had typed spit something out that I wanted it to work was just wonderful. And I think throughout the rest of the year, being able to create projects and, like Ifra said, creating things by yourself that you can create and see the end product is just so satisfying. So for me, that's when the light bulb went off, computer science.
And so we have to ask a really important question, which is how do we make it interesting, engaging for young people and especially for young women?
Oh, wow. I think the app was a really big one. I went into computer science hoping to create an app. That has not been done yet, not yet. But definitely projecting what you can create with computer science. A lot of times the stigma at my school is you see all these books of code and it looks foreign, like it is a foreign language to people. And they see the code, but they don't see what the code creates. So showing what the code creates to the students is very powerful.
Yeah, and I think that having more programs like the TEALS program, where they send actual volunteers, because that was my hook. That was what got me interested, knowing that I can learn from real professionals, that I can get the same knowledge as them. So I think more programs like that spread across will definitely get more people interested.
So bringing folks from local companies and other organizations into the classroom for that first exposure, you think is key?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's so important. So, Hadi, the issue that we face is scale, right? And as we struggle with bringing this to scale, where we create a social expectation that people are going to learn the basic elements of the technology infrastructure of how things work. How do you see scale happening? Obviously, you've had huge success in a very short period of time. That's transformational. How does that continue? Tell us a little bit about how that's gone. What are some of the big public policy issues that you've seen, and what are some of the natural market forces that you've seen in terms of the uptake that you've seen? Where do you see this in a year or two, and what do you think the numbers are going to be?
Sure. We're now best known for the Hour of Code, and the reason we did that is basically, frankly, as a story of our organization. Code.org started off with this video that Ed mentioned that went viral, and the video was really created as a personal hobby. I didn't actually have a long-term plan, and it was this amazingly viral video, but 2 weeks before, I was like, well, I guess I need a website to put the video up on. And I remember asking my brother, what should I call it? Learn computer science or learn computer programming? And he's like, if you have Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg in a video, get like the shortest URL possible, call it code.org. And so that wasn't free, but I bought it just because we had Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. And then so once we put this video on the website, we're like, well, what am I going to do next? I put up a form saying if you're a school interested in this, give us your email address and so on. And we figured, hundreds of schools would respond, and we'd give them some information on what to do with it. And the video was super viral. We had 15,000 schools ask us for help in a week, and I was all by myself without any plan. So a secret part of the Hour of Code plan was this time around, we'll know what we're doing next. So after we build a lot of momentum, there'll be some follow-through rather than just collecting email addresses. So we have 3 points of follow-through. One is an online course that's designed for elementary and middle school kids. And the Hour of Code right now has roughly 500,000 students do it every week still, and it's been just going on its own since last year without any marketing. Of those 500,000 students, roughly 50,000 students a week, or 50 to 60,000 students a week sign up for the follow-on course. And that follow-on course is in 20,000 classrooms. So by far the best sort of aftermath of the Hour of Code is that we now have 20,000 classrooms teaching computer science in the last 4 months that weren't doing it before. Just to put that in context, right. Thank you. Prior to this year, all of computer science in this country was in 13,000 classrooms. So we've gone from 13,000 to 33,000 in 4 months.
People need to tweet that out. Think about that. Think about the implications of that. Think about sort of the institutional infrastructure of the educational community. Think about how long it takes to get information like out there, and think about the scale in this time frame.
Yeah, that's been by far the best thing we've done. And part of it is because there's latent demand for learning this field. Mm-hmm. Part of this is the curriculum we made. The online course is super easy. And if anybody here hasn't tried it, it's well worth trying. 6-year-olds do it, and 60-year-olds find it fun as well. It's designed like a game.
How many folks in the room have tried it? Spent a few minutes on it. Great. Wow. Large awesome. Number. That's awesome.
Yeah, the other thing we're doing, which is nowhere near as glitzy or seen sort of in the you can't quote it in numbers quite the same way, as partnerships with school districts to train teachers and to make this a formal part of the classroom. And we just announced, we've been working on this for 6 months. We just announced that 30 of the largest districts in the country are partnering with us, including New York City, Chicago, Broward County, Florida, Denver Public Schools, Spokane Public Schools. We're basically training existing math and science teachers in those schools to now become computer science teachers. And the beauty of training those existing teachers is the school doesn't need to hire anybody new. There's no budget change for the school. The existing staff can offer this course.
So if you think about how overwhelmed from a time perspective teachers are, if you think about their professional development responsibilities around curricula and classroom management and all of the issues, if you think about making a high value, high quality curriculum, simple, easy, accessible, free, and the licensing on this is all Creative Commons, which is openly licensed. Unbelievably important. Means, of course, it's not proprietary and being held back for commercial reasons. Unbelievably powerful. So giving the respect to teachers of making something so powerful, easy and accessible and free is an incredibly powerful lesson for everybody who's trying to influence quality of education. So what's the feedback you've gotten from teachers?
The feedback from teachers has been amazing. And for me personally, this journey has been more than anything else a journey in realizing how awesome American teachers are. That's right. First of all, on the Hour of Code, the number of teachers who wrote in saying, I didn't think that so much of this. In fact, I didn't want to do it. And then so many but other teachers in my school were doing it that at the last minute I decided to do it myself. And I've never, ever seen my kids be this engaged. Or I think what Robin mentioned of people turning their Hour of Code into a day of code. We've had tons of feedback like that. Or teachers saying, this is the new candy in my classroom. I use the coding exercises you've provided as the incentive to get kids to do their math homework, which is fantastic to hear. Our online course, 99% of the teachers who teach it have said they'll recommend it and teach it again next year, which I don't think I've ever seen a survey result of 99% to when you ask a yes/no question, 99% yes was was unbelievable to me.
It is, absolutely. And Ifra and Megan, tell us real quickly, how did your teachers react to this? And maybe some that weren't in computer-related fields. Were there other teachers in the school that you saw get engaged in this, or did you see an impact in your school?
All right. Well, at my school, we have a number of teachers that took computer science on their own at classes at UW during the summer. And my computer science teacher was so excited. He ran up to me at school and he's like, Megan, like the video I showed you last year about code.org, did you hear about Hour of Code? And I was like, oh, yes, I did, Mr. Procopio. Like, isn't it cool? And we were just kind of jumping up and down in the hall. And there's definitely a lot of excitement at my school about it, especially because computer science is very well spread. We have 60 students every year, which is pretty big. It's about 3 or 4 classes of computer science every year that sign up of girls, and it's wonderful. And you?
Well, yeah, kind of the same thing. My computer science teacher, Mr. Bond, the classroom teacher, he came up to me. He's like, okay, if I'm going to need to volunteer to help other people do, we're going to get all schools, the local middle school, we're going to go in a big class, we're going to spend an hour of code, but we're going to extend it. We're going to do the hour code, but we're going to do more because people are going to like it. And I said, how are you so sure? He said, trust me, they're going to like it. Yeah, so I was like, okay. So then we went and I volunteered. We helped out the kids, and then everybody just liked it. I think like everybody felt like the actual like achievement of finishing something and understanding it and knowing it. So a lot of people, like he said, continued it.
That's great. So we're going to open up in just a minute for some questions, so please be thinking about what you'd like to share. So the obvious next question is, what are the challenges when it comes to barriers, when it comes to challenges? Often when there's this type of success in this short period of a time, there's just a sense of excitement and thrill and moving forward. But to really bring about structural change, to really impact this as not only computer literacy, but a recognition that having an understanding of the technical underpinnings of how things work is a transformational change. Yep. Tell us what some of those challenges are.
Yeah, this is definitely, we face a lot of challenges. We've obviously grown very fast. I'd say probably at the speed of light for education sort of reform of any sort. But the education system in this country is not something you look at and think is structurally nimble and agile and quickly adaptive. And we're trying to spread this course as quickly as possible to every school in the country. So that's not easy. We face policy challenges and structural challenges, but the good thing is that parents and students and teachers, all three, really, really want this. So effectively the inertia or the problem isn't actually with individuals, it's with structures that aren't designed to move really quickly, but the people within those actually do want to move quickly. At the policy level, almost exactly a year ago, the Washington legislature passed a bill to allow computer science courses to satisfy existing graduation requirements in math and science. And it was literally, Ifra was one of the people who joined me at the bill signing to give a speech about this. And I remember talking to Governor Inslee saying, what can we do to get the same policy passed in the other states of the country? Back then, Washington was the 10th state to pass this bill. It's now less than 12 months later. We've gotten 10 more states to change policy doing the same thing, and we've gotten from what was 22% of the population living in states where computer science counted for graduation requirements. By the end of the summer, we're going to be in a point where 75% of the population has that policy, which is really rapid change for any kind of legislature or policy change to go through the states of this country. However, that's a small policy change. It allows a student at an existing school that already teaches computer science to get course credit. What's really important is for the 90% of schools that don't teach this field to start teaching it. And there's a lot of work we needed to do at the policy level to do that, and also at the school district level, convincing school districts that this is as important as biology or chemistry, and just like you wouldn't cut biology from the curriculum, pretend that you're cutting computer science by not offering it, and to think of it that way. Texas just ruled, and it's not been finalized, but the Texas State Board has just ruled that every high school in Texas must teach computer science. They just decided, and they'll go forth with it. So one state down, 49 to go. But at least that's an example of a state being relatively nimble, I would say, or at least daring to make a move like that. But getting, whether it's top-down mandates or a bottom-up rise, as you mentioned, we need those two to meet, especially at the district level and at the state level, for people to recognize how fast this is moving and to react to it.
That's right. That's right, absolutely. And one of the reasons that that bill was passed was Representative Magendas and Representative Maxwell, who's with Governor Inslee's office, helped make that happen. So you're absolutely right. So I want to open the door to a couple of questions, and super interested in hearing from folks who are interested in the social movement side of it, interested in the technology side of it, and interested in where we go from here. So as you're preparing to raise your hand, I also want to ask a super quick question. If you ask yourself whether or not, if you look at the evidence, the research, and sort of brain research, language, foreign language, is today in our country taught at the high school level. It's a requirement for admission to the University of Washington. And yet, from a research point of view, the data is overwhelming that kids learn language in their younger years. So elementary school would be the right years in order to do that. Do we have an opportunity with computer literacy and technical literacy to think about where the evidence is? Do you think this is an opportunity to move this toward those younger grades?
I absolutely do. So, the course that I mentioned is spreading so quickly is designed for elementary and middle schoolers. We're actually about to release multiple courses for kindergarten, for third grade, for fifth grade, and programs to basically enable elementary school teachers to teach this stuff. And learning computer programming for a first grader, they just think of it as pure fun. Much more fun than almost anything else they get in school, because these are kids that grow up on iPads and computers, and they just think of it as like a game.
That's right. And I really encourage all of those folks here, regardless of your organization, regardless of where you're at, to think about the reality of that. If you follow the data, the evidence, and the brain research, that's where it makes sense. Okay, questions? Yes, sir. Up here. Yeah. Speak loudly. Oh, sorry. Is there someone with the... Yeah, I apologize. We do have a microphone. We're going to go with folks who have the microphone, and raise your hand, and we'll move the microphone away, or come to the sides where there are microphones. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead over here.
Hadi, I'd like to hear what you think about, there's this narrative that the tech sector, and I don't know if this holds true in Washington as much as other states, has been less willing to engage in like the governmental process to create like policy changes than some other sectors. I think the New Yorker talked about it like last year at some point through financial contributions, by forming political action committees, that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if you think that there's some opportunity here for like greater engagement from entrepreneurs who have made a significant amount of money in like driving this sort of change.
Sure. Well, all of our top funders are tech entrepreneurs and tech companies, because if there's one thing that unites tech companies and tech entrepreneurs, it's believing in the opportunity for other people to follow in their footsteps. Myself, I think of myself as having had such a lucky career that if I'd grown up in a school that hadn't exposed me to computer programming and computer science, I wouldn't be here. And I think that's true of almost every successful tech entrepreneur, which is why they support this stuff. As to whether they get involved as donors versus as volunteers in schools versus as lobbyists, that depends. Some do all of those things. Microsoft is lobbying for this and donating to us and helping teach IFRA, and then other companies do one of those three things.
Great, thank you. Yes, sir, over here.
Hello. Okay. I've taken both the Intro CS classes here, and both of which have filled up these giant auditoriums. And from my perspective, it's not that there aren't enough students interested in CS. It's rather that the higher education universities don't have enough room to fulfill them. And if CS is one of the most competitive majors here, what do you see will accommodate all of these new students that you are pushing to study CS at a higher level?
That's a great question. What I would say, first of all, is that that problem is not true in every university, and this is part of the sad case of where we're at, which is that basically, with computer science being offered in such a minority of schools, there's clear evidence that the kids who try it in college are more likely to have been ones who were exposed a little bit in high school. And when it's only offered in higher privileged high schools, you find it's among the most popular courses in University of Washington. It's the most popular course at Harvard, at Stanford, at Princeton. But at the University of Florida, they were thinking of cutting the department because not enough students were enrolling. So there's a clear class disparity growing in terms of interest in this field because of exposure at the K through 12 level. So that's the first thing I'd say, that problem is not universal. The other thing I'd say is for this state, UW definitely needs a larger program and more funding. There is no question, when there's 27 jobs for each graduate, that ratio, there's an immediate economic output for this state if we basically produce more graduates.
That's right. Absolutely. And to put it on the table, we have to be transparent about the lack of funding from the state. This is a public institution. Public education is a right. The fact that tuition now accounts for 70% of the base budget of the University of Washington is wrong. We're better than this as a state. It's not just about 27 positions for every one person trained. It's about a transformational acknowledgement that this is about civic life for all of us as well. So we need to be better as a state.
By the way, can I say something about this, since there are enough policymakers here, which is that if you just give money to the university, this is one of the most expensive degrees to teach, and so it's much more effective if the money is specifically said this is for computer science, because that's where this ratio of jobs is crazy, and that's the place where the money is needed. So I'm not sure. I know there's people here who believe in doing this.
Well, it's a legitimate challenge. We face the fact that we have a queue of kids who want to be electrical, mechanical, and software engineers, and we don't have enough slots is fundamentally wrong. We have to, the proverbial we as a state, as taxpayers, and as an institution, need to deal with all of those internal dynamics, and we need to provide a pipeline of young people who have direct access to those positions. It's wrong when someone has qualifications, skills, and capability and doesn't have a slot. We're better than that as a state. All right, next question. Yes, sir.
I can probably
Yeah,
talk in here.
use
Okay,
the
so code.org, right now it's this incredible springboard, and I used it with some of my computer science students, and they loved it. What are your plans for a more advanced course? Are you going to continue to focus on the springboarding aspect of it? Or are you going to kind of integrate in more challenging problems like you would get like at the UW's practice it site or coding bat, things like that?
So we're working from the lowest levels and the lowest grades up. When we do partnerships with school districts, we do professional development of teachers from elementary all the way through high school. Currently, what the high school teachers are getting is more of a traditional curriculum, which involves, lesson plans delivered as PDF files, and the teacher does the lecturing in front of the classroom. Whereas at the elementary school level, it's just press play on this website, and that does the teaching. And we're gradually moving. We have an engineering team that can't do all grade levels all at once, so we're starting from the bottom grades up. So hopefully by the end of next year, so by the beginning of the next coming school year, we'll have a full curriculum pathway from K through 12, which will have more advanced stuff in it as well.
Thank you. Yes, sir, over here.
So I teach in the College of Ed at Seattle University, and I also teach part-time in a middle school teaching Scratch to kids, and they just eat it up. It's crazy fun. But from the perspective of higher ed and specifically teacher ed programs, what should we be doing? Because we bring in these really amazing, talented people that really want to make a difference in education. But the truth of the matter is they're not programmers. They're not people that are coming into education to make that kind of a difference. So what can we do to get the teaching force up to speed to be able to teach these skills and to really make a difference in the schools? Because the teachers in the schools are willing to do it, but they don't necessarily have all the skills to carry that out in the schools.
Well, I think teaching, the easiest place to solve that problem is at the elementary and middle school levels, just because the coursework for the students at those levels for computer science is, if a third grade kid can learn it, I'm sure their teacher can learn to teach it as well. In fact, the curriculum that we're producing for the elementary school levels, it takes roughly a weekend workshop to take an elementary school teacher and enable them to teach computer science to their third grade or fifth grade class. And basically that's effectively Scratch level programming. At the high school level, it takes more learning for the teacher. And one of the best things we collectively as a community can do can get our schools of ed, which is where, this is where teachers go to learn how to be teachers. Part of that program should be offering them the opportunity to become computer science teachers. And every teacher goes through a tech ed program an ed tech program to learn about how to use the smart board and the technology in the classroom. So a little bit of that program could at least introduce them to how to teach computer science as well.
That's also a great question, though, in introducing the concept of people involved in technology-related fields who are not going to be electrical, mechanical, and software engineers. What about the business side? How do folks who might be visual learners take advantage of this, who might really want to be on the business, the marketing, the sales, as we know, is central to success? How do those folks, like teachers as well, sort of that same core concept, get value from this?
Well, I think the basic learning, or something that every student can learn, and it's funny, computer science actually is a much more visual learning kind of field. It's not just about equations, it's about writing something and then seeing something on a screen, and you use your eyes to decide if it's broken or not just by looking at it. So, the feedback that Megan was saying, when you see hello world show up and then you can change it to goodbye world and it responds to you is very visual and fun.
Right. But it's important, it's particularly interesting, I think, today as we move toward an era of visualization of data and big data and business analytics and all of the uses of data that are now so accessible, and those visualization tools that everyone's using are really transforming our ability to understand information. So, yes, sir.
So I'm currently a high school teacher. I teach some of the digital stuff. My dad was a math teacher and was into computers, and so I was exposed in high school as well. My son is enthusiastic about getting into some of this programming. But having also been an administrator in schools, I'm looking at this as a little bit of the policy angle. One of our challenges is we're loading the plates of the elementary teachers as is. And the kids will be thoroughly enthused to be able to get in a program and see things work. That's not an issue. And even some of these teachers would be great to get in there. But when we're dumping math requirements on them, the English requirements on them, the reading requirements on them, social studies requirements on them, science requirements on them, they're looking at their plate and going, and you want me to do what? So, we need to get the policymakers on board with this as well to get some of that shifted so that we got the time to do that. Keyboarding has disappeared in a lot of our high schools. And when we talk about coding, keyboarding's a key piece. You need to be able to type. Because if you can't type on that keyboard, you're not going to keep up with code. You're not going to keep up with some of that stuff. So how do we get that back on the plate as well as getting the excitement there?
Yeah,
I would say that keyboarding may not need to come back. I think Facebook alone is helping teach keyboarding for kids. So obviously that's blocked in most schools, but most of the things that they do still have access to in schools on their computers are helping kids figure out the keyboarding side. But in terms of the main question you asked in terms of, well, elementary school teachers, like all teachers, are overloaded. The way we're designing our curriculum is to use computer programming to teach math and to teach science and to teach English, so that now we're just starting it, but I'm quite confident that in 1 year I'll be able to show measurable improvements to say kids that took our computer programming course at elementary school did better at math and English and science, but especially at math, than kids who didn't. And as soon as we show that, then it's going to completely switch things on the policymakers. I think it's a really hard battle to convince educational policymakers to reduce the importance of math or English. Far easier to prove that computer science courses can help kids learn this stuff. And this isn't because computer programming is math. It's because you use math if you want to do something with a computer. So for example, if you wanted to write a game and the goal of the game is to get the ball into the hoop and you want to measure the distance between the ball and the hoop, you need to measure the x distance and the y distance and then do x squared plus y squared and then square root it. And that's the Pythagorean theorem, but it's so much more fun to learn that in the context of writing a game than in the context of the normal way we teach the Pythagorean theorem.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this question is for Aoife and Megan. I have an 8-year-old daughter who loves math, and I will confess we have not done much with her, period, when it comes to coding. But I think she would have a natural aptitude and interest for it. And I know women are really underrepresented in computer science right now. So what advice would you have for me or other parents out there of little girls who might want to do what you're doing now?
All right. Wow. I don't have very much parenting advice, as I can't really speak from experience, but most encouraging your daughter. It's wonderful that she loves math and science, and for me, really, it was my parents' enthusiasm that supported me to pursue that path, and then putting her in an environment where coding is fun and where friends are coding, because, you know, I like to do what my friends do, and surrounding her, and with Hadi's code.org, just exposing her. He talked about how exposure at a young age, especially with a language, will really help her pursue that. If she wants to pursue that path, or if you want her to pursue that path further in life, exposure at a young age will definitely be fundamental.
And yeah, like you mentioned that she was interested in math, and I was also very interested in math. And like in math class, I'm usually not the first person to raise my hand. I usually just let someone answer, and if they're wrong, then I raise my hand. And yeah, so like, but with computer science, I actually learned something. We were talking about how like remainders and like multiplication and like division, all these things, and like we were creating a math game, and in math class, the teacher asked a question, and it was actually related to computer science. I was the first person to raise my hand. And I figured that, you know, like, there's no reason why, like Hadi said, there's no reason why computer science cannot help you with across all the fields, because really it does. It helps you with language arts class because you have to type. When you type code, you type, so you type faster and you write faster and you understand it. It helps you with math. It helps you with reading because you have to read your code. It helps you with history because when you're doing code, you can search up history. Like you can find out, you know, like JavaScript was created by like a team in like 2 weeks. So you find out all these history and you find out all this stuff, and it can help you across all the fields. I can say that I improved academically across all my subjects by taking computer science.
I have two pieces of very specific advice, by the way. One is if you take your daughter to one of these camps or workshops, try to find a place that has a better ratio of girls to boys. And the way to do that is just gather some friends with other daughters and bring them in a group. Because none of the existing places have a good ratio of girls to boys. And then if your daughter's like one of 2 girls with like 15 boys, she'll leave the thing saying, okay, I learned some stuff, but I don't like it. But if you find some of her playdate girls and go together, then she won't even have that experience. The second thing is visit learn.code.org, which is where our tutorials are. And you don't need to go to a workshop or whatnot. She'll think of them as a game, and she can learn on her own just fine.
And I want to take on that point as well, because one of the drivers of learning something like this is mentorship. And so the question is, the organizations that you're a part of, your companies, the school environment, the work environment, what does it take for all of us as parents, as neighbors, as friends, as uncles and aunts and all that, to put in the time to help a kid to walk through those first key steps? And maybe it's even as simple as visiting code.org, right? Maybe it's as simple as doing those first few games. But the question really is, or the challenge is, to step forward and to really put in a little bit of that time around gathering a handful, especially for young women. We have to do better. We have to do better. We have task forces and studies and commissions and reports and government programs, and that and $4 will get you a latte until we decide as a community to put the time and the energy and effort in to helping not only young women, but of course everyone who really wants to learn, and we've got to make that extra effort. So mentorship is a big part of the answer. And each one of us should have a relationship with a young person that's authentic in terms of putting in some time and energy and effort to help that person take the next step. And it's obviously incredibly important. So congratulations to all the parents.
If one of you guys want to teach a young 9-year-old to learn how to code.
That's right.
Very true. We can talk after.
Right. Yes. Yes, sir.
Hello. So we've been talking about the statistic that 9 out of 10 high schools doesn't offer any sort of programming or computer science education. And you, Hadi, were asked what challenges there were to extending education to, you know, this super majority of schools that don't have it. And you mentioned that there's kind of a top-down, bottom-up solution, that both parts have to be part of the solution. So I was hoping to just elicit a couple action items from you and Representative Carlyle. One is kind of a top-down action item. What can Olympia do to aid the situation, to speed progress? And the other is a bottom-up action item. What can your average Washington resident do to bring it to their community? And I'm also curious how we're going to track progress and set goals in this arena. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead. It's a lot of questions. In terms of what Olympia can do, first of all, we are in conversations with enough people to give them a list, so you may not need to take notes as I'm saying this. But things like establishing clear standards in education standards, not saying that they're mandatory for students, but at least if a school district wants to teach this, these are the definitions of what the courses mean. Creating a teacher certification, clarifying teacher certification pathways and creating an endorsement, creating incentives so that a teacher who gets certified gets some kind of recognition for being a computer science teacher, and ideally a salary boost of some sort or an incentive, creating incentives for schools to teach it. And then the ideal thing would be requiring that schools teach it, although that's the type of thing you'd want to do only after the pipeline of teachers is large enough that it's not just suddenly breaking the system. But those are the top-down things that can happen. From a bottom-up standpoint, asking your legislature to do those things is one thing you could do. But then asking your local school district or your principal or even a school teacher to make this happen. At the high school level, it's really the district that decides. You know, your average biology teacher can't decide that I'm going to start teaching computer science 5 days a week at 10 o'clock. That's not a choice they can make. The district needs to decide that this is something that's important to us. But at the elementary school level, that's much, much easier. And we're actually going to have workshops in every single state starting this fall where any elementary school teacher can say, I want to take a weekend workshop, show up, learn enough, and then start offering it in their classroom. And those are going to be listed on our website for any elementary school teacher to sign up.
Thank you.
So a couple thoughts on that as well. The issue is to acknowledge that computer science is the 21st century modern language that we have to be fluent in. And what that means is looking at the educational, instructional, funding, infrastructure, professional development, looking at all of those issues in a formal environment. What's powerful about this, the reason we're here today, is that there's also this incredibly robust forcing function of just the marketplace of ideas, the marketplace of value, the marketplace of high quality content that's putting healthy and positive pressure on those formal systems. So the informal bottom up, the formal top down have to work together. That's what brings us together. That's why schools of education, that's why individual teachers at the local level. So the fact that the city of Seattle School District is not included in the list of New York and Chicago and other major cities is an incredibly disappointing reality. There are some administrative and logistical problems. There's some funding issues and concerns, some reservation. And as you can imagine, if a school district isn't all in and ready to just jump in and just embrace this, it's really hard for an organization like Code.org to grab a hold of that and convince the horse that it's thirsty and that they need to get engaged until they choose. So those are some of the things we need to have conversations with principals, with school board members, administrators, and others. So that's absolutely right. So it's top down, it's bottom up. Yes, sir.
So just a quick question: when you're talking about school districts that don't buy in entirely to the Code.org work, what do you do when you run up against that type of resistance? Do you have a method that you use to go and convince the district that this is really necessary, or do you kind of move to many of the other districts around the country?
So mostly we don't try to convince them, and if they're not interested, there's 13,000 districts in the country. We'd rather work first with the ones that most want it. And it's not, it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but unless a district wants it, they're not going to be a successful partner. Yeah. However, we do get the message out to their parents, the parents in that region, saying, ask your school district for this, which then has a really good effort of, it does a lot to make the district then want it as well. We've had almost 1.5 million people have signed our petition saying that every student in every school deserves this opportunity. And just to put that in context, gun control has about 200,000 signatures on the White House petition. anti-gun control is roughly about the same. But since we're bipartisan and non-controversial, we have almost 1.5 million signatures. So that's very helpful when you have that in a region and a district that doesn't want to work with us.
That's exactly right. So another issue that surfaces in all of this is parents. We sort of heard from some parents. We know that reaching parents is incredibly important. What are your suggestions for how we can get parents to put in a little bit of time to really understand that this is the language of today and tomorrow and the role that parents can play? Other thoughts?
Well, the way that my mom and my parents kind of accepted it was that, my mom, she didn't even know what the heck Google is. She thinks Google is someone who just tells me all my answers. She doesn't know anything about Google. So then, when I started taking computer science, I kind of showed her a little bit of what I was doing and how it can affect me. I showed her some of these statistics, and I showed her how most of all, before how it can help me, how much I actually liked it. And you'll find out, most parents can tell you that it's all about their kids. They'll move heaven and everything just to do whatever their kid likes. So I think to reach parents, you're going to have to show them more that their kid likes it and their kid wants to do it. There's not really where you can put it, but just the fact that parents will follow whatever their child wants. And if their child wants computer science, then they're going to follow computer science, and they're going to push for the school to have computer science, in a sense. Yeah.
We just passed an amazing milestone this week, which is that 1 out of 3 students in the United States have done the hour of code, which in terms of impacting parents, it's an enormous number. And it's still growing, so without much effort.
That's great.
So I think that's going to help a lot in terms of impacting parents.
It is. And my little first grader, 7-year-old, came home with her little hour of code piece of paper and was very proud about it. All right, so let's wrap up with just a few minutes. Hadi, give us your vision for where this goes from here. And of course, and a very important question, what's the call to action? What can we do to help? I'm generally, personally, very overwhelmed. Code.org, it was just me and another guy less than 12 months ago. We're now a 20-person organization, which is growing very fast, obviously getting to 20 people in under 12 months. But the enormity of what we're trying to do, we have 30 school district partners and 20 employees. And many of them are not even dealing with the school districts, they're engineering on the websites. But what lies ahead for us right now is growing from 30 school district partners to 100 school district partners and getting our online course from 20,000 classrooms to 100,000 classrooms. In terms of how somebody can help, the easiest call to action would be to sign the petition at code.org, which many of you may have already done, but if you haven't, that gives us your email address and your zip code, and then we can tell you when something's important in your region, how you could help. The next easiest thing, if you're a parent of an elementary school teacher, ask them to sign up to do a weekend workshop with us. And if you're a parent of a high school teacher, ask your school district to offer computer science if it doesn't already. And it's important, don't say code, say computer science, because some districts do offer computer science, not with us, and that's great. They don't need to offer code.org. Our goal is to get computer science into every school. So we hear from schools that complain that parents are telling them, you have to do this, and they're like, we do teach computer science, it's the same thing. And I think our name has become strong enough that parents themselves don't know as much the difference. That's great. Well, listen, thank you so much for your work. Thanks for your passion and the energy that you're bringing to this vision. Let's thank Megan and Ifra and, of course, Hadi and all of you. Thank you for making the effort. Thank you for coming out today. And we just so appreciate your sense of interest. And to all of the folks, please take the call to action. Thank you very much.
Say a final thank you very much to Representative Carlyle, who missed his calling. I must say, Charlie Rose, you got nothing on him. That was terrific. Thanks to all of you. They were terrific questions. I'm just so happy we have some action items we can move on, and let's go. Thank you.